It was just after 11 p.m. when the call came in. A woman barely coherent told the dispatcher she didn't feel safe. Her husband had changed, she said. He watched her differently now, followed her around the house, said things no husband should say. She ended the call before help could arrive. That would be the last time her voice was ever heard. They looked like any other blended family. A man trying to rebuild after past mistakes. A woman who had done everything to keep her home intact. And a daughter, his stepdaughter, moving through adolescence, looking for a sense of stability. There were birthdays, family dinners, school plays. From the outside, nothing seemed out of place. Just another household in another quiet neighborhood. But when you look closer, things were not as ordinary as they appeared. There were long silences. In conversations where words used to be gentle corrections turned into possessive tones. Time spent with his stepdaughter grew longer. His wife grew quieter. Friends noticed her smile began to look forced. She stopped coming to book club. She stopped answering her phone, and when she did, her voice was distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. There were no restraining orders, no bruises, no broken windows, just whispers, vague, unexplained feelings that something was off. The kind of discomfort you can't prove, but you feel in your bones. She told one friend she didn't like the way he looked at the girl anymore, that something in his eyes had shifted, that she felt like she was being pushed out of her own life. Then one night she vanished. Police found her body inside the home. Blunt force trauma, no signs of forced entry, no witnesses. Her husband, the one who made the call, said he found her that way. But investigators weren't convinced. The evidence didn't add up. His story changed. And when they finally sat him down, when they pressed hard enough, he gave them an answer no one expected, a confession that would reveal a chilling truth. He hadn't just planned to leave his wife. He had planned to replace her. This is not just a story about a murder. It's about how the definition of family was manipulated to serve one man's need for control. About how love, when taken too far, can twist into something unrecognizable. This is the story of a husband who said he would do anything for his stepdaughter, and meant it.
They met the way many couples do.
At work. She was in payroll. He was a maintenance contractor, quiet, dependable, always on time. He was older, more reserved. She had been through a difficult divorce and wasn't looking for anything serious. But he made her laugh. And after what she'd been through, that felt like enough. They married within the year. At the wedding, her daughter, just 12 at the time, stood next to her in a light blue dress, holding her hand. The groom called them his girls. People said he looked proud, even emotional. He told relatives he finally had a real family, that this time he was going to get it right. They moved into a modest home in a quiet area, not wealthy, not struggling, comfortable. He took care of the house and cooked dinner most nights. She worked long hours, often late, but said she finally felt safe, that her new husband was reliable, that her daughter had someone to look up to. For the first couple of years, everything appeared to fall into place.
Neighbors remember him washing the car with a girl on Saturdays, teaching her how to change a tire. He showed up to school functions, took photos, smiled wide. He called her my daughter when talking to coworkers. Most assumed she was his. The mother often spoke of how grateful she was that they got along so well, how rare that kind of bond was in blended families. She told her sister it was a blessing, but some noticed things, details easy to ignore at first. He was protective, overly so. If the girl was late from school, he would call her repeatedly. He didn't like her sleeping over at friends' houses. He said he was worried that she needed guidance. She was growing up too fast, he said. The world wasn't safe. There was the way he sat close to her during movie nights, how his arm would linger around her shoulders, how he'd speak for her when she was asked a question. At 13, it was subtle. At 14, it was harder to explain. The mother began spending more time alone, in the kitchen, in the bedroom, on walks by herself. She stopped calling her sister as often. She started journaling again. In one entry, later recovered by police, she wrote, "He says I'm being jealous, but I'm not imagining this. The way he looks at her, it's not right." Still, there were no confrontations, no fights loud enough to wake the neighbors, just silence. Shifts in tone, distance, where there used to be connection. He told coworkers she was depressed, that she was pulling away from the family, that he didn't know what to do anymore. To outsiders, they still looked like a functioning household. But inside that home, the roles had started to shift.
The mother, once the center of the family, was becoming a shadow, and the stepdaughter, knowingly or not, was stepping into a space never meant for her. The first cracks in the foundation had formed, but no one, certainly not the mother, knew just how far it would fall. By the time she turned 15, everything had changed. She was no longer a little girl. Her features had sharpened, her voice matured. She began wearing makeup, experimenting with clothes, asserting herself in ways common to teenagers, except in this house. Those changes were noticed in ways that made others uneasy. Her stepfather became more involved, not just attentive, obsessively so. He monitored her social media, read her text messages when she left her phone unattended. He questioned every friend, every male classmate, every after-school activity. He called it protection, said he didn't trust the boys in her school, that she was too naive, that she needed someone to look out for her. But it wasn't just his behavior toward others that raised questions. It was how he behaved with her. He complimented her more than usual, not just the way a father figure might. There was a tone, a hesitation in the way his voice lingered when he told her she looked beautiful. He began buying her clothes, jewelry, gifts that weren't inappropriate on the surface, but given often enough to make her mother take notice. He would find excuses to be alone with her, driving her to school, even when the mother offered, scheduling errands that conveniently aligned with her whereabouts, taking photos of her when she wasn't looking. The mother saw it. She said so in her diary. "It's like I'm disappearing. Everything revolves around her now. He doesn't touch me anymore. He doesn't look at me, only at her." At first, she confronted him gently, asked if he realized how much attention he was giving the girl. He laughed it off, said she was being paranoid, that she was jealous of their connection. But his tone changed when she pushed harder. He accused her of ruining the family, said she was trying to turn the girl against him, that she was always the problem. And so she stopped arguing. She withdrew, began sleeping in the guest room, told a friend at work she thought he was grooming the girl. The friend asked if she was sure. She wasn't, but she felt it in her gut. The stepdaughter, meanwhile, seemed unaware, or perhaps unsure of how to interpret the attention. She was flattered, confused. She trusted him. He had been in her life since she was a child. She had never known a father who stayed. He told her she was special, that she understood him, that they were alike in ways her mother never could be. He made her feel like the center of the universe. The mother watched it all unfold from a distance, powerless. Her warnings were ignored, her presence diminished. The more she resisted, the more isolated she became. She told her sister on the phone, "I don't think he sees her as a daughter anymore." Her sister asked, "What are you going to do?" She didn't answer. A month later, she was gone. It happened on a Thursday. There were no signs of forced entry, no screaming neighbors, no blaring sirens in the night, just a single 911 call placed by the husband. He told the dispatcher he found his wife at the bottom of the stairs, said she must have tripped, that she wasn't breathing, that she was cold. When paramedics arrived, she was already gone. The body was found face up, a gash on the back of the head, no pulse, no sign of recent medical intervention. Her arms were stiff, her fingers curled. Investigators noted bruising around the neck, defensive wounds on her hands, a fractured wrist. The blood around her head had pooled unevenly, suggesting she had been moved. The husband stuck to his story, said he came home late from picking up dinner, said he called out for her, said he saw her lying there and panicked. But detectives noticed things he couldn't explain. There were no takeout containers in the car, no receipt. The house was clean, too clean, no dust disturbed on the banister, no sign she had fallen from any great height. And then they noticed the daughter, the stepdaughter, sitting silently in the corner of the living room, pale, eyes wide, her clothes wrinkled, a duffel bag by her side. When asked where she had been, she said she had spent the night at a friend's house, but the friend later told police she never showed up, that she had texted, saying she'd changed her mind. Officers found the stepdaughter's toothbrush and clothes packed neatly into the bag. Alongside them, a handwritten letter, unsigned but clearly addressed to her. The handwriting matched the husband's. It read, in part, "Now it can be just us like it was always meant to be." When confronted with the note, he denied everything, said it was a joke, a misunderstanding, but the timeline unraveled quickly. Cell phone records placed him at home during the time he claimed to be out. Security footage showed him leaving alone, no food in hand, no panic in his step. And then came the second letter, hidden in his tool shed, tucked behind a box of nails. This one wasn't written to the girl, it was written to himself, a confession of sorts. Part fantasy, part reality. A twisted rationale about love, protection, and freedom. A list of things he needed to do: burn the bedding, clear the browser history, tell the girl it was an accident. He never got that far. By the next morning, he was arrested. The stepdaughter was taken into protective custody. The case became a sensation, not because of the violence, though it was brutal, but because of the motive. It wasn't rage, it wasn't money, it was something far more disturbing. This wasn't just a murder, it was a replacement. Inside the small, windowless room at the precinct, he sat for nearly an hour without saying a word. He looked calm, not anxious, not angry, just composed. As if he had rehearsed this moment in his mind more than once. The detective across from him didn't speak right away either. He just laid out the photographs, one by one. The wife's bruised wrists, the blood pattern by the stairs, the letter. Still nothing. When they finally spoke, it was casual. About work, his background, how long he'd been married. He answered every question with polite indifference. Said they were a happy family, that she must have fallen, that this was all just a tragic mistake. Then came the shift. The detective leaned in. Read him the contents of the letter out loud. Now it can be just us. Like it was always meant to be. And something changed. His jaw clenched. His fingers tightened. For the first time he looked nervous. They asked again where he had been. His story changed slightly. Said he left earlier than he thought. Said maybe he hadn't gone to get food after all. That he'd forgotten.
They asked about the bruises.
He said he didn't know. That maybe she bruised easily. They asked why the girl had a bag packed. Why there was another letter in the shed. Why everything seemed to point not just to a crime but to a plan. He denied it all. But the words began to slip. It was never supposed to happen this way. She pushed me too far. I did what I had to do. The detective asked, did she know? He didn't clarify who he meant. The mother or the stepdaughter? The detective repeated, did she know you were going to kill your wife? His answer was a whisper, almost inaudible. She would have understood. She always understood me. It wasn't a confession, not officially, but it was enough. Enough to paint the picture prosecutors would later use in court. They say a confession tells you the truth, but sometimes it tells you what the person needed to believe, what they told themselves to make sense of what they'd done. In this case, he needed to believe it was love, that his feelings were real, that what he wanted was justified. But no matter how gently he spoke about it, the facts were unmovable. His wife was dead. His stepdaughter was manipulated. And the man who once called himself a protector was now being called something else entirely. A predator. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Journalists filled the back rows. Locals sat shoulder to shoulder, clutching notepads, whispering theories. The stepdaughter, now under state protection, would not attend. Her statement would be read by an attorney, but her absence didn't go unnoticed. Neither did his entrance. He walked in wearing a plain shirt and slacks. No emotion, no eye contact. He sat beside his defense attorney like a man attending a job interview, not a murder trial. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. They painted a picture of calculated obsession, a man who slowly erased his wife from the family while grooming her daughter to take her place. A man who covered his tracks, who waited until she was isolated, who used affection as a weapon, control masked as love. They presented the letters, the text messages, the cell tower data, the cleaning supplies purchased 2 days before the murder. The fact that while his wife's body was still cooling, he'd attempted to access the stepdaughter's phone location twice. They read excerpts from his journal. She looks at me now like she used to. I know she feels it too. When her mother is gone, it will be different. It'll be real. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, said he suffered from mental illness, that the death was unintentional, that he had snapped under emotional strain. But the jury saw something else. They saw intent, planning, the long game. And when the stepdaughter's statement was finally read aloud, there was no sound in the room. She wrote, he told me I was special, that my mother didn't deserve him. He said we'd be together soon. I thought he meant college. I didn't know he meant something else. She ended the letter with a single line that echoed long after it was read. He didn't just take my mother, he took the only version of my childhood I thought I could trust. It took the jury less than 3 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder. Maximum sentence. No possibility of parole. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He only turned once to the gallery, perhaps hoping she was there, watching. She wasn't. She was already trying to rebuild the life he had shattered. In the months following the trial, the town remained quiet, but it was a different kind of silence. Now, the kind that lingers after something has been broken. Something that used to feel safe. The house was sold. The furniture cleared out. Neighbors say the yard overgrew quickly, as if even the ground no longer wanted to remember what happened there. The mother was buried on a rainy afternoon. No grand ceremony, just a few co-workers, a sister, a cousin, and a young girl who stood near the back, face half hidden beneath an umbrella, staring at the headstone without blinking. She didn't speak that day. She hadn't spoken much at all in the weeks since the arrest. Therapists said she was processing trauma, that her silence wasn't resistance. It was survival. Because what do you say when the man you trusted most was the one who shattered everything? What do you do when love was used as camouflage? The state provided counseling. She changed schools, moved in with her aunt, cut ties with most of her past. For a while, she went by a different name. Teachers were told not to press. Some mornings, she woke up crying. Other mornings, she didn't wake up until afternoon. Her aunt described her as frozen in time, as if part of her still lived in that house, on that staircase in that final moment before everything fell apart. And yet, even in silence, the truth continued to echo. This case became a subject of lectures on coercive control, on familial grooming, on the warning signs no one wants to believe could exist inside their own home. Professors cited the letters, psychologists analyzed the timeline. Advocacy groups pointed to the failure of those closest friends, teachers, coworkers who saw the red flags but said nothing, unsure of what they meant, because it didn't look like violence. Not at first. It looked like a family. That's what makes stories like this so dangerous. It's not that they're filled with monsters, it's that they're filled with people who wear the right face, until they no longer have to. The girl is older now, legally an adult. She rarely gives interviews, but in one brief statement made 3 years after the trial, she said, "He didn't love me, he used me, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to unlearn that difference." It wasn't a headline, it didn't go viral, but to those who knew the story, it was everything. Because in the end, this wasn't about a man who snapped. It was about a man who waited, watched, and acted when he thought no one was paying attention. Cases like this don't just disturb, they educate. In the wake of the trial, psychologists, criminologists, and legal analysts dissected every aspect of the case, not for spectacle, but for understanding. Dr. Lee Morgan, a forensic psychologist specializing in familial abuse, spoke at a national symposium just months after the verdict. She described what happened in one clear clinical phrase: this wasn't about love, this was calculated emotional captivity. According to Dr. Morgan, the husband's behavior followed a chillingly consistent pattern: isolate the victim, undermine the existing caregiver, build dependency, reward loyalty with attention, withdraw affection when control is threatened. What stood out most was how methodical it all was. There was no chaos, no outbursts, no violent history. He didn't yell, he whispered. Criminologist Professor Harold Fields reviewed the case for a legal journal, pointing to the letters as key indicators of psychological grooming. In his analysis, he wrote, he wasn't planning a murder. He was planning a future, one that required someone to disappear. But perhaps the most haunting takeaway came from a former FBI profiler, who said in a panel discussion, this man didn't just manipulate a child, he rehearsed a narrative in which the murder became an act of devotion. He made himself the hero of his own story. The case is now studied in law schools, featured in domestic abuse prevention trainings. It's used to teach officers how to spot the subtler signs of coercion, signs that aren't bruises or screams, but silences, small shifts in behavior, changes in who someone trusts. Because coercion doesn't always knock on the front door. Sometimes it grows slowly inside the home. And as the experts speak, as academics quote pages from court transcripts, there's one voice that continues to be felt, even if it's rarely heard. Hers. The girl whose childhood was rewritten by someone who claimed to protect it. The woman she is now, who must carry a truth few would ever want to speak aloud. That she wasn't saved from danger, she was chosen by it. As we reflect on the chilling story of a man who crossed every line, we're reminded of something crucial. The true horror wasn't the murder itself, but the years of manipulation that led up to it. The quiet way the husband made himself a villain in the eyes of his stepdaughter without her ever realizing it until it was far too late. The careful steps he took, masking his obsession behind a veil of affection, pretending to be her protector when all along he was preparing to destroy everything she knew. This case is a sobering reminder that predators don't always fit the image we expect. They don't always lurk in shadows or wear masks. Sometimes they are the ones closest to us, the ones we trust to keep us safe, the ones who can destroy our lives without us, even realizing they are doing it. But for all the darkness that surrounds the story, there's also light, because the stepdaughter survived. She made it out. Her voice, though quiet now, has been heard, and it's a voice that demands to be listened to. She reminds us that even in the most disturbing of circumstances, survival is possible, that healing, though painful, can still be found, and that those who have suffered, those who have lost so much, still carry within them the strength to rebuild. The journey is long, and the scars may never fully fade. But in her story, we see resilience, and perhaps, in some small way, we find hope for those who are still trapped in silent, unseen struggles. If you or someone you know is in a similar situation or needs help, there are people ready to listen, support, and guide you. Resources are available, and it's never too late to ask for help. Remember, no one deserves to live in fear. If this story has left you thinking about the complex layers of manipulation and the dangers lurking beneath the surface, subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories, expert analysis, and powerful survivor testimonies. Thank you for watching. Stay vigilant, stay aware, and as always, stay safe.